Okay, looks like we're good to go. Welcome everybody. We made it. We had some technical and health challenges all around, but it's good to see all of y'all. I would like to actually turn it over to Faye, who's here in person, to introduce our speaker. Once the presentation's done, we'll stick around and talk about a few local issues afterwards. Oh, and Catherine, you need to unmute too.
So we are so fortunate to have him. He has degrees from the University of Oklahoma, Cleveland Institute, and Bowling Green State University, where he met Maylani. And Scott, well, where are you, Scott?
Well, I'm right here.
Okay. He has done presentations, it looks like, in every state in the union. Are there any left?
Oh, we got a few left, yeah.
It doesn't look like it, and also throughout the world. So we are so fortunate to have him. He has distinguished himself in the research about teaching special needs kids, something that is so needed. We have, I think, several people watching today. We know that Rachel has had several special needs kids, and so this is going to be really interesting. Several of you heard him speak at the national conference in Atlanta and hear him talk about his book, Autism and Piano Study, A Basic Teaching Vocabulary. So I assume that's what he will be talking about today, but we are so fortunate to have him. I mean, I can't tell you all his accolades. It would take all his time today, so he wouldn't get to speak. So we are so fortunate to have you, Scott, and it's all you now.
Oh, thank you very much, Faye, and thank you, Chris. And hello, Mei Ling, friends from way back in the day. Great to see you. Thank you all for letting me be here and spend some time with you today talking about some of my best friends in the whole world and how we just have to change and pivot and reframe our pedagogy a little bit to help them fulfill their potential, and also so that they can be part of this whole thing that we do with music and this whole community instead of being less than. And I know our profession or the medical professions use a lot of words like disability, deficit, and I tend to not like those words so much because they make our students immediately less than instead of part of. So I just like to use the word differences because then we're all on an even playing field. We just need to see how everyone looks at the world a little bit differently and how maybe we need to communicate a little bit differently to help them achieve their potential. So what I thought we would talk about today is maybe just autism a little bit and what that is, because there are some diagnostic criteria that help me reframe my teaching so that I can meet the needs of my students. And while this is primarily about autism, it can certainly be adapted for students with a wide range of neurodiversities. And I always tell everyone that the only question that is wrong or silly is the one that doesn't get asked. So if everybody has questions, we'll take plenty of time at the end, and everything is on the table. So please don't be shy about asking anything you have a question over. So how many of you have a family member or you know someone who is on the autism spectrum? Could you just kind of raise a hand there? Very good, very good. What I think is wonderful about the piano teaching profession and the music profession in general is that when we have a child who knocks on our door and wants music study, all of you immediately say yes, and then you try to figure out how to make it work. And I'm not sure there are a lot of professions where that happens. So it's just a real credit to all of you. So autism is what we call a spectrum disorder, and what that means is there's a wide spectrum. On one side, you may have somebody that you don't know has autism, or under the old criteria, they may be described as having Asperger's syndrome. On the other side of the spectrum, you may have somebody who may be nonverbal and may need very substantial support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And everyone else falls somewhere else on that spectrum. And there's a saying that goes that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because it's a different place and a different way of seeing the world along that spectrum. So the diagnosis, of course, is made by a team of professionals. I know there are Facebook quizzes and Instagram quizzes that say if you do these 5 things, you might have autism. No, it's a team of professionals who arrives at this diagnosis. And the criteria by which we do this is called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, currently in its 5th version text revision. I know that's like an enormous title, so we just call it the DSM-5 for short. And so these criteria are very detailed and very long, but I'd like to sort of boil them down into 3 areas that help me reframe my teaching for my students. And the first one, social behaviors, a difference in social behavior. Secondly, a difference in social communication. And then a difference in imaginative thought. So that's great for me to say that, but what does it all mean? Well, you know, when a typical student might show up for a first lesson at my studio, they know to show up on time. They know to wait until the specific time that their appointment is going to start. They and their parents know how to wait quietly out in the hallway or in the waiting room. That student knows when I open the door, they know when to speak, when not to speak. They know a certain vocabulary that they can use and a certain vocabulary that they can't use. They know how much personal space to leave between the two of us. They know how much eye contact to make, and they know whether to reach out their hand for a handshake or whether to wait. And then when we shake hands, they know through all these unspoken nonverbal cues how hard to squeeze the hand and when to let go, and when that contact is broken, and when to wait for more instruction on how the social situation is going to unfold. Now, we do the same thing when we meet each other, only a lot of our unspoken social behaviors are based on our age, our gender, our social position, our careers, and what that type of social interaction is going to be, whether it's a medical appointment, whether it's a teaching appointment, whether it's a religious appointment. All of this changes. And most of us have not been taught this. Certainly we had a little coaching from our parents, but for the most part, we have observed those behaviors, we have copied them, decoded them, and then put them into action, and then sort of created variations on those behaviors and transferred them to other social situations. So a person with autism may not be able to observe those behaviors. They may not be able to decode them. They may not be able to put them in action or transfer them to another situation. So if you're like me, your students are really excited for their piano lessons and excited to make music. So it may be 3:50 or 3:55 in the afternoon, and I hear on my door, and it just won't stop. And I have to remember that my student is so excited to get there. And so I need to open the door with what I like to call my perpetual smile, which is my facial expressions and the warmth in my voice and my body language, and say, I'm so glad to see you today, but you know what? It's 3:50 right now, and I still have Joey in here for his lesson, and we need to finish up some things. So can you stand out here quietly with mommy or daddy, and can you wait until 4 o'clock? I'll open the door because I'm glad to see you also, and then I will invite you in. I'll show you where to place your books. I'll help you get your books ready. And do you think you can bring your books to the piano, put them on the side? Can you sit on the bench? And can you wait quietly so that I can get ready and so that we can begin? Is that all right? And then I go back, and when it's 4 o'clock, I open the door and go through that entire set of behaviors. Now, my student with autism has a real need to know their schedule and their routine and what is going to happen next. So if I teach all of those behaviors to approach the lesson and also how to navigate the lesson, then the likelihood of anxiety or frustration or some kind of behavioral outburst or shutdown is going to be alleviated. So a lot of times if our students, from our perspective, are misbehaving, sometimes it's just a lack of ability to self-regulate, or they're just anxious and afraid and frustrated, and this is all just surfacing in their behaviors. So I have to teach all of those behaviors to begin the lesson and to have my student be successful. So differences in social communication. My students with autism, I must remember, may be nonverbal. So much of their communication may be through their body language or their facial expressions, or maybe through some assistive technology that they're using. They may be minimally verbal, or they may have some developmental delays, which mean that they don't possess a wide vocabulary. And so I have to make sure to work with the parents and work with the students and observe them to see what their mode of communication is and how I need to adjust. And I also have to remember that I need to teach the meanings of the words that I use in the lesson, and also the meanings of the words in context. Because, you know, as musicians, we use a weird vocabulary that makes total sense to us. It's like lawyers or doctors, but not necessarily to the person out there who's approaching us for the first time. Like if I say a piano key or I say key to my students, they think this. They don't think this weird little white thing or black thing on the piano. So I have to teach them what it means in context. And I've got to also remember that maybe my student has processing issues. So I need to give them time to recognize the sounds that I made with my mouth as words, to then assign a meaning to that word if they know that word, then to put it into action and to formulate a plan for letting it happen in the lesson. So sometimes they just need 20 or 30 seconds just to process all of that. And that's okay. You're not being a bad teacher if you give them that time. That's just what they need to be able to work and be successful. So those are some of the differences in communication. So differences in imaginative thought. So how much of your music teaching and mine includes imagery, analogy, and metaphor? Probably a lot. Yeah, I would think probably way over 75%. Well, for a person with autism who may think in a very literal and specific way, all of a sudden imagery, analogy, and metaphor are gone because they just don't parse a relationship between what you're saying and what is going to happen at the keyboard with their fingers or in the sounds that they're making. And I'll give you an example of that. If I point to measure 8 through 12 and say, okay, look, measure 8 through 12, there's a crescendo, it's got to grow. You know what to do there, and your traditional students know what to do. But in literal terms, that's the most ridiculous thing I could have said, because number one, plants grow, people grow, animals grow, the music doesn't grow. And I could have a really bright student who says, but Dr. Scott, last week you told me that when I play a sound on the key with the piano, that sound decays and goes away. So why are you telling me that it's going to grow? Because that's not right. And if they're smarter, they may even tell you, and that's really bad teaching. And you know what? They're right. They are. So for my student who thinks in a very literal way, I need to say, well, the first note in measure 8, can you play that very strongly with your thumb? Or if we have a crescendo, bad teaching here, I just messed up. I need for you to play that first note very gently with your finger, touch the next one less gently, make the next one strong, make the next one stronger, and the next one very strong. Then they can play a beautifully graded crescendo. It's just been done in a literal way with what they need to do with their body. And so then I can say, that's what it means to grow at the piano. So the next time I say, can that music grow? Can you remember what to do with your fingers? So I always want to couple the literal and specific and then explain what the analogy or the metaphor or the imagery means. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't use those things in teaching if they're right for your student. Of course, you're the best judge of that. But I tend to start with the literal and specific first and then go to the imagery. Or better yet, ask my student what they think about it, because what they say will give me a window into their thinking and into their music making and how they view my instruction and what they're doing at the keyboard. So just to recap there, I always have to teach the social behaviors necessary to approach the lesson and navigate the lesson. And then I have to remember communication, teach the meaning of the words, Scott, and teach that kid the meaning of the words in context, because if they're confused, it's probably my fault, and usually is. And then literal and specific before imagery, analogy, and metaphor. And if I do that, things are going to be going pretty well. If not, I need to look in the mirror and just say, look, teacher fail. What is your problem? Step back and readjust. Because kids are brilliant. They really are. I really believe that children are brilliant until someone tells them they aren't. And I want to make sure that anything that goes wrong, if it's my fault, that I acknowledge that. So they don't have any guilt or shame or frustration associated with something that wasn't their fault. So the next thing that happens before I sort of show you some videos about what a typical lesson would look like is that most of my kids are exhausted by the time they get here in the afternoon. They are exhausted, they are overstimulated, they are hypersensitized and aware, hyper aware of everything that's going on around them. And that can manifest in different ways. Maybe they have sleep schedule issues, so maybe they haven't slept for 2 days. Maybe they have dietary issues and their nutrition hasn't been great for the past couple of days. They have digestive issues sometimes. Maybe their medication is wearing off and it's not yet time for the next dose. What else? They're also mentally, intellectually, and emotionally and physically exhausted because they have been trying so hard all day. And then they have to deal with getting in the car, getting out of the car, parking, all the noise of the street, the new building, the new place, all the new people, the change in temperature from outside to inside, all of the noise, the elevators, and everything else that's just hammering at them constantly. So when they get in the studio, the first thing I do is we just sit down, take a deep breath, and just have a little chat. And that chat is a chance for them to relax, to acclimatize to my studio, to get used to me, and just sort of to calm down and desensitize from everything that's been going on in their life. It also gives me a chance to watch their breathing, their physical energy, judge their emotional state and their intellectual state, so that I can change my pacing throughout the lesson to be the person that they need at that time. And then we give them their routine for the lesson. Now, all students with autism have a real need to know what's coming next in the lesson. So the first thing that I'll do is get joint attention so that we're paying attention to each other. They may not make eye contact, but that doesn't mean that they aren't listening intensely to what I'm saying. And I'll say, "Are you ready?" so that we get consent. And if my student says yes, we're good to go. If they say no, I need to ask, do you need more time? Or I need to determine if this is just an avoidance behavior. And that's where parents can be very helpful, and they're always present in the lessons, and they can tell me if it's an avoidance behavior, because I can't tell you how many times the student will say, "Mommy, drink of water," and the mother will say, "You just had one." Or "Daddy, bathroom," and they'll say, "We just came from there." So it's an avoidance behavior. And then I give them the routine. And the routine could be something like, first we are going to do right hand, left hand. Then we are going to do finger numbers. Then we're going to do key names. Then we're going to do lesson book, page 9. Then performance book, page 11. And then we'll do improvisation. And then it will be time to go. So are you ready? What's first? And almost always they'll go right back and tell me what's first. So this routine, it could be verbally delivered, it could be written down, it could be using a picture or an icon system. And sometimes the students may need to choose what they're going to do first within the lesson plan, and that's fine. And I know that sounds overly detailed, and I know you're all thinking, yeah, but I've got 30 students. I don't have time for that. Or I lost the paper, or I forgot to write it down, or it slipped behind the piano, or I lost it. Don't worry. Just give that student the routine. And if you forget what's coming next, just look at your student and say, hey, what's next? They'll tell you. They have a steel trap memory for details and lists, so don't even worry about it. So now I'd like to show you some of those routines and how the students respond to them. So our first student is Aaron. Aaron was about 8 or 9 when he was studying with me at this point. Aaron is what we would call needs substantial support on the autism spectrum. He is nonverbal, and he has developmental delays that affect his intellectual ability, and his fine and gross motor skills as well. And what you'll see in the video is that almost nothing in his routine has to do with music study. It's all with the behaviors getting ready for the process. But he is a wonderful young man and was just one of my best friends. Hi, Aaron. Good. That was great waving. Good for you. Are you ready to play the piano? Aaron. Aaron, look at me. Are you ready to play the piano? Hands down. We're going to work on attention. We're going to work on eyes looking at the keyboard. We're going to work on taking turns. We're going to work on your fingers. We're going to work on playing black keys and playing white keys. Are you ready? Are you ready? Aaron, look at me. Look at me, Aaron. Aaron. Aaron, look at me. I'm here. Eyes looking at the keyboard. You can play. So he's a wonderful young man. And you see lots of touching going on in the lesson. And I know we are a little nervous about that and touch phobic in today's society. But there's always a parent in my studio during the lesson. They are my greatest resource. They can help educate me about things that are going on, things that I should do, things that I should not do. And so often the touching is done in consultation with them. And it has a specific function, which could be focusing attention or soothing the anxiety or the frustration that's starting to surface with the student. And you know, I'm forcing him to make a lot of eye contact with me when he may be a child who necessarily doesn't want to do that, but that's because that's what he was working on at that point with his parents and at school. So they wanted me also to work with that in the lesson. So sometimes the things that we're doing can complement each other. Now our next student is Margaret. Margaret was born 3 months premature. She is almost completely blind, and she has autistic tendencies and also developmental delays which affect her intellect, they affect her speech, and they also affect her fine and gross motor skills. But she's a lovely, lovely person. And at the end of her routine, you'll see me say, "What's first?" And she goes right back to the beginning and tells me what's first. She's just a fantastic person. Right, that sounds like fun.
Jesus, now I play the piano.
Wait a second.
Now wait a second.
We're going to work on your fingers,
Work on your fingers,
work on your patterns,
work on your palms.
and we're going to work on your scales.
Scales jumping.
Yeah, jumping, good. You remembered to jump in your scales. Then we're going to do your pieces,
Pieces.
and then we're going to do duets.
Oh
And
boy.
it's time to go.
Now time to go.
All right, hands
And
down,
the last one
hand
is-
in your lap. What are we going to do first?
Do you want all parents?
Yes.
Mom,
Where we
go-
play your C pattern. So isn't she a wonderful personality? She doesn't study with me anymore, but we've remained good friends, and last July we celebrated her 33rd birthday, which is pretty good for somebody who wasn't expected to leave the hospital when she was born, so that's just wonderful. You also see a lot of me holding her hand. That's contact that she sought out. And it's also an opening into the hand over hand type of teaching that we're going to have to do because of her blindness. So she's just fantastic. So the next video I'd like to show you again is Erin. And this is Erin learning finger numbers and how to do black keys on the piano. And this video contains a really bad mistake on my part, and this is why I show it. It's quite humbling. And for a traditional student, when we're teaching the group of black keys, I can pretty much just say, okay, let's do some black keys on the keyboard. Now, can you look at the middle of the keyboard? Yeah, do you see any groupings there? Yeah, do you see that group of 2 black keys? There you go. Right hand, 2 and 3. Can you play both of those black keys at the same time? That's fantastic. Now, can you watch me and see how my hand position is? Can you mimic my hand position when you do that? That's terrific. Now, take your time, and can you just play some groups of 2 black keys all over the keyboard? That works for a traditional student. For a student like Erin, he needs step-by-step breakdown in the teaching. And that means I need to gain joint attention, and I need to get his consent. Because in a traditional sense, if I use that with Erin, I assumed that he had joint attention with me. I assumed that he gave his consent. I assumed that he knew his colors. I assumed he knew what the word key meant. I assumed that he knew right hand and left hand. I assumed that he knew his finger numbers. I assumed that he could pivot and attend to my model. And then I assumed that he could execute that model physically at the piano. And then I assumed that he could transfer all of that to other keys. So that's about a dozen places where this lesson could have just exploded in any way. So with Erin, I have to say, Erin, can you look at me? Are you ready? Can we play a black key? Very good. This is your right hand. This is your finger number 2. This is the piano. This is a piano key. This is a black piano key. Can you take your finger number 2? Can you touch a black piano key? Can you push it down and make a sound? Great job. You just played a black key with your right hand finger number 2. Can you do it again? Great. Can you do it 2 times? So that's the level of breakdown that some of my students need. Not all of them, but some. So when we look at this video, since Erin is nonverbal and doesn't have a large vocabulary, you'll see us just doing pretty much tactile and visual finger numbers. And then when we do the black keys, I just leave out a lot of those steps, and it's more nonverbal teaching. And Erin likes to noodle on the keyboard, and so we had to build into his behaviors, my turn, your turn. Hands in your lap, my turn. And at the end of the video, I forget to say your turn when I want him to play a black key, and he refuses to do it until I get wise and say, I'm sorry, your turn. And he looks at me and does exactly what I wanted him to do. So again, he's just a great kid. Take me a second to cue this up. Really good. Hands down. Hey. Hands down. Show me your ones. Show me your ones. Erin. Erin. Show me your ones. Where's your one? Show me your ones.
Yeah.
Hooray. Good job. Show me your 2s. There's your 3, 4, 5. Show me your 1s. Good job. Wow, your fingers are awesome. Show me your 1s. Show me your 2s. Show me your 3s. Show me your 4s. Good. Yeah. Man, you're getting really, really good at those. Yeah. Okay, Erin. Hands down. Let's work on playing your black keys. Look at your keyboard. Erin, put your hand down. You're fine. Look. Black key. Look down at your fingers. Black key. Look at your fingers. Black key. Look at your fingers. Key. Look at your fingers. Black key. Look at your fingers, Erin. Black key. Look at your fingers. Black key. Black key. Play a black key. Erin, your turn. Play a black key. play one black key for me? Please? Play a black key, Aaron. Play a black key. It's your turn. Play a black key. Good. Smart kid, huh? Teacher fail as well. So at the beginning of that lesson segment, he wasn't misbehaving. It just took him that amount of time to process what I was saying, to focus, and to make it happen at the keyboard. So I always have to remember that Aaron just needs more time, and that's okay. And the worst part about the mistake was I could have gotten impatient with him or reprimanded him for doing exactly what I had taught him to do. So he's a smart kid. So let's take a look at another video of somebody who's working on their music reading and how that process is broken down for this student. This is Stanton. Stanton was also about 9 when this video was taken. Stanton needs substantial support on the autism spectrum. He also has speech delays, and he has developmental delays that affect his intellectual process and also his fine and gross motor skills. And he also has a lot of anxiety issues as well. So sometimes those just surface in what we call self-stimulation behaviors, where he's trying to self-regulate by moving his hands, or also doing something we call scripting, which is making sounds or reciting movie scripts or book passages or something that just helps him self-stimulate and self-regulate all of his emotions. And I have to listen to all of that because some of it may just be stimming and scripting, but sometimes he may have seen a situation in a TV show or in a movie that's a specific social situation that he understands, and he may be using that script to communicate with me. So I always have to listen carefully and determine what is communication and what isn't communication. But for Aaron, the reading process is almost the same. For Stanton, the reading process is almost the same as what you saw with Aaron. I have to get joint attention, consent, and then I break down the process. And for us, that is closing the fall board, working on finger numbers, then working on key names, then teacher model, and then student trial. And when I'm watching Stanton go through his student trial, I have to do something that I like to call working in the process, which means that I am with him every second, guiding him, saying things, pointing to things, and helping him avoid mistakes, which can result in undesirable behaviors. So that's what you'll see at action here. And Stanton is just a fantastic young man. Can we work on this one dawn?
Yeah.
Yeah. No? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, good, good. You had to work on lines 1 and 2. Let's do line 1. Finger number first. You ready? 1, 2, good. 5, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4. Again. Ready? Go. 5, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4. No names. Ready?
Yeah.
D, A, D, E, F, A, F, E, G and A, F and A, E and A. My turn. Your turn. Getting ready. Get ready. That is correct. Where's your right hand? Where's your right hand?
Oh, come on.
Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Away. Now, F, A, back to, no G, and F. Very good. Then, And we do it again and again and again, as many times as he needs to make sure that he can practice everything well at home. And so I know you're probably saying, yeah, music reading, that's rote learning. And yes, it is. But over a longer period of time, that becomes true self-sufficient music reading. And Stanton is about 23. He still comes to his lesson every Tuesday evening. He plays on all of our recitals. He improvises. He plays some small compositions that he's written. And he's just remained a really, really good friend. And he's now in level 3 of the Royal Conservatory Celebration series. And he can learn those pieces pretty much on his own with just some guidance from me. So he's done real well. So next, I'd like to show you Margaret, and she's going to be working on some music counting. Now for Margaret, our traditional counting systems are just not meaningful for her. She doesn't really understand numbers beyond counting or telling time, and it's just not meaningful for us to apply numbers to her piano study. So what I like to do with Margaret and with a lot of my students is what I call directive words. And these are counting words which tell them exactly what to do with their body to execute the rhythm and sound at the keyboard. So for directive words, a quarter, half note pattern would be play, 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 hold, or touch, 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 hold. Or it could be finger numbers, or it could be key names, whatever she needs at that time. So with Margaret, you're also going to see some hand-over-hand teaching because she's blind. And you'll also see me working in the process where I'm just constantly talking to her while she's playing. And these students are remarkable teachers in their own right. And I often just flip the situation and realize that I'm the student, they're the teachers, and they're going to help me do a much better job if I listen to their instruction.
Bashful butterfly.
Can you play it again? Remember to hold your notes, please.
Yes.
Both hands ready.
Your toy.
Are you ready? There, now you're ready.
Now your toy.
So will you remember to hold your notes?
Yes.
All right. So isn't she great? She's so patient. And I know you might be looking at that video and thinking, how does this guy teach college pedagogy? Look at her wrist position, look at her hand position, look at her finger position. It's all wrong and awful. Yeah, it's not great, but remember that Margaret has a lot of gross and fine motor skill delays. So for her, that's the best that she can do. And sometimes these things can improve over time, but sometimes that's just what she needs to do to get around the keyboard. And so I have to make some adjustments in my thinking about piano playing, because in the end, it's about Margaret. Certainly I want her to read in whatever way she can, whether that's Braille or something else. I want her to be able to count and be able to play expressively at the keyboard, but that's only the way that we build the relationship with Margaret as a person and make her feel part part of the world instead of just being parked somewhere until she needs something. So that's typically what happens in a lesson. And I know when I say all these things, it sounds like it's scripted, and it looks like the lessons just unfold very, very well. But as you know, it's not always pretty. It's kind of improvised chaos sometimes in a piano lesson. And so I have to be able to adjust and flow with every minute. So just remember that. Sometimes we're in the midst of the hurricane and we need to steer the tornado as well as we can. But I do believe that the students are the best teachers. And if I just sit back and give up some of my authority and give up some of my ego, that I'm going to learn from a master pedagogue every time they come to the lesson. So I think that was all I really had to show you today. And so now I'd be happy to take any questions from anyone. And please feel free to ask any question, and I'll do my best to answer. If it's student specific, please remember that I've never seen that student. I don't know them. And so I could only give maybe a general answer to a question. But please, anyone who would like to ask, please go ahead. Yes, Faye.
I just wonder about the parental support at home. You know, you're doing things in a progressive way and a scripted way. Are those parents good at doing that same thing at home? I was watching that one mother and she seemed to be moving all around, and I thought, you need to know writing this down.
Well, yes and no. They do their best. They're all there during the lessons, and so sometimes they take notes. And much of what they do at home is exactly the same as what I do in a lesson. They just have to plug music into that process. And we will often have iPads or phones taking short videos of things if they need those for use at home. We just have an agreement that it is for personal use at home and it doesn't go on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or anything like that. So they do their best. And what I learned early on, I should say I don't have to remember, I learned it very early on, is that these kids have a real gift for lists and scripts and routines, and they typically remember everything that I do and say and practice it at home. Even if they aren't physically practicing, often they're going through it step by step up here mentally, and that's for them is sometimes just as useful as playing on the keyboard. So yeah, we all do our best.
What is it? Why did you go down this path?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
You
And I think
are,
it's muted now.
you have the patience of Job. And I think a lot of us, we just want our students to make progress. So I'm just curious, what started this with you?
Well, thank you. That's a very nice compliment. But I always respond to that by saying, there's no time to be patient. I am constantly scrambling to keep up, to redirect, to work in the process with my student, to kind of reframe my teaching and try something new that's going to work with them. So there's no time to be patient. But really, it was just a phone call. I think it was summer of 1999 that my first student's parents just called because a local dealer had seen them shopping for a piano. The child was blind, and I later learned that she had profound autism and profound disabilities, but she had a real aptitude, a really high aptitude for music. And he just said, well, I've got this friend at the university, why don't you call them? And I said, sure, let's give it a try. And I always just tell parents, yeah, let's give it a try. If at some point you feel like it's not working and I'm not the right person, tell me. I'll find somebody else. Or if at some point I think it's not working and I'm not the right person, I'll tell you and we'll find somebody else. They just want a chance. That's all they want. Yes.
She's will read the music. Oh, she read the music.
Was this Margaret and how she read music? Well, a lot of her instruction was by rote. Uh, Margaret was very good at reading grade 2 Braille and was constantly reading books that they got from the Library of Congress. So we got Alfred's Basic Piano Library in Braille from the Library of Congress, and she was able to begin learning some of the Braille music code, and she could read that and then start playing on the keyboard. So by the time she left, she was able to learn short pieces with the Braille music code. Excuse me. And any student with blindness or another disability can register through the Library of Congress. I, as a teacher, can't do that because I don't have the disability. But if your student needs Braille music, they have most of the standard piano repertoire in Braille. Most of the most commonly used piano methods can be gotten in Braille. And that's a free service, so it's just sent to them in the mail. They also have a lot of other information on music teaching and also Braille instruction. So if a sighted person like me, I can actually get into that and start learning more about it. And then also large print music and a lot of other resources. So it's just a great place. And there's a free download of the Braille music code, which you can get. I think it's about a 600-page PDF, which I know you think, oh my gosh, 600 pages, but that includes everything to do with music, not just piano study, like choral scores, orchestra scores, everything. So yeah, great resource.
That's awesome. I love this book so much.
Oh, thank you. It's very
I've
kind.
taught a couple of blind students and several students with autism. And I love talking to you in Atlanta and meeting you and talking to you about some of my students. And I cried probably 3 times within the first 10 pages because you just expressed everything so perfectly about what it feels like to teach these students, what it feels like if other teachers don't accept them in group circumstances and things like that. So it's wonderful. About the Braille, have you ever tried yourself to type the Braille or to dig into that system? Because we tried and it was way over my head. I gave up.
It's way over my head. We do a little bit in my graduate pedagogy course when we work with this subject, but I just basically just figured out that, look, Margaret knows Braille. She knows it way better than I am. So I had a small Brailler, and we would just put the paper in, and I would just tell her what to type, and she would just type it in, and then be able to read.
And what's so hard for them is it's totally different. Like a C are the same characters as D for doe and all that. So they have to relearn so much. But one thing I always try to tell teachers is we don't know how what we're teaching them is carrying over into other aspects of their life. Because my student, she won some national Braille competition in California, and her mom said it's because the independence of the fingers that we had been doing with the piano lessons that helped with that so much. I have a guest star, I think, on here. Jody, are you still on? Jody.
I don't see her name there.
Oh, I don't either. Oh, goodness. She said she was on. Well, she is the mother of a student I've worked with for 15 years. And Scott, have you worked with anybody that is doing this new, I guess it's not therapy, but spell to communicate?
Oh, I have had some students who had applications on their assistive devices who had that kind of thing, and it worked very well for us.
It's amazing. So they have this huge letterboard, and they express their thoughts by spelling the letters. So most of you have met Michael, and it's just been such an eye-opener because the responses that he has to questions are long, eloquent, cerebral. It's unbelievable. Oh, wait, Jody said, she says, I'm getting back on right now. Okay, so his mom's getting on. But, we're having to change how we've talked to him for the last 15 years. And it's incredible, words that have never come out of his mouth, like for terminology. I just randomly asked a few weeks ago, what language did these dynamics come from? He spelled Italian. He's getting everything we're saying to him, but it just can't come out of his mouth. There she is.
Yeah, I
Jody,
always have to remember that less ability or less willingness to express a thought or an emotion doesn't mean less thoughts or emotions. And there's an entire world up here that's going on. And I have a 5-year-old right now who sometimes he'll just use Chinese words in his lesson because he's learned them at school. And I have to say, James, I don't speak Chinese. Can we do English, please? Or he'll start saying something in Spanish because he has an affinity for that. And I just have to remind him, hey, James, I'm not as smart as you. Can you please speak in English?
well, it's been so hard to speak to him. I hate this word, but normally, and I lapse back into this. Michael, we are starting here, okay? And and he got that board. Don't talk to me like I'm stupid. And so his mom's writing this post-it note, and she's putting it on the piano, and I see her kind of turn away, and I thought, uh-oh. And then read that, and I could see her tearing up, and she said, he doesn't speak this casually or comfortably with anybody outside the family. And I thought that's the same thing as like, a kid you've had for years in 9th grade going, don't talk to me like that.
Well, I think you bring up a really important point there in that the piano lesson becomes a safe space. You become a special person and a trusted person in their life. The music is the entree into that relationship. And so sometimes we do get more communication, or they feel comfortable expressing more things, or they learn how to express more things in the lesson. So it's as much about teaching social behaviors and social communication as it is about middle C and half notes and quarter notes.
Which is Jody, could you tell them briefly about
I'm here. Yes. Hi.
Hello.
Michael's mom?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can.
Okay.
So Jody,
What was the question?
just about Michael's ability to communicate now, and how we've had to relearn to teach him, and how we talk to him, and how we've thought it's been about our patience with him, but now we know it's been about his patience with us all this time.
Yeah, so true. Michael spent, as he expresses it now, on a letterboard, which I wish I had in front of me. Hold on. We can use this one right here. It's a very low tech, literally laminated letterboard. He now tells us how he lived for 25 years in a silent prison where his brain had all the language and his brain learned all the things, but his body was betraying him. So even though he has some speech, but it's very unreliable. And with that, he has said things like, I say yes to most things, and all of my life I have ended up in situations where I don't want to be because my mouth says things that my brain does not want it to say. And speech is a very is a very, very fine motor activity, and we relate speech to intelligence or language, and they are not connected at all. In fact, speech and language are in two different parts of the brain. So when we hear someone like Michael who speaks very kind, in his own words, childlike, he said, my words are childlike that come out of my mouth. We think his intelligence is less than. We have learned over the last 18 months that Michael is beyond brilliant. His language is beyond anything. I have 2 master's degree. I have a husband with a PhD. We have an educated family. He is beyond anything we can fathom, to be quite honest. And it's because he has sat all of his life and listened. But we have treated him less than because of kind of what came out of his mouth and his ability to communicate verbally with us. And so now, and piano is fine motor, and I always wanted him to do it, because he had a great relationship with Rachel, who really understood him and us. And, but it was also kind of like a different language, and just kind of expanding your mind and having different experiences. But with this new communication mode, I mean, he said to Rachel, I can play anything because you're teaching me now the way I learn. And he's like, and hasn't it changed, Rachel? Like,
Oh,
the
yeah. And like
crazy-
talking about hand over hand and stuff. And of course I do that with my blind students and with my young students. But he was finally able to say on the board, stop repeating the notes and the finger numbers to me. That does not help. I understand in my brain, but my hands cannot get to the keyboard or whatever. Help me by taking my hands to the keyboard. And I'm like, oh,
It's not unusual for our students to have very high music aptitude or a splinter skill where their music aptitude outpaces a lot of their other skills. And I've had students who were far better improvisers than I am and whose music aptitude far outstripped my own. So that's not unusual. Was there anyone else who had a question that they'd like to ask?
I was curious if you've ever had a student on the autistic spectrum who had perfect pitch.
Yeah, quite a few.
Did that change in any way how you taught them then if they had perfect pitch?
Oh, no, not really. I think it probably helps us in our improvisation, which all of my students are required to improvise during lessons. They're required to do it on the recitals and also with their composition. And I think they also have such a high audiation ability that's been developed that even when they're away from the keyboard, it's just constantly going in their heads and they're figuring things out. So I can see a student who may be progressing here one week, the next week they just may be here. And it's because it was all going on up here in their brain.
Well, David had a wonderful, loving relationship with a student with autism who sadly passed away in a car accident not too long ago and was very good friends with my student. But David, could you tell them a little bit about how he saw colors with different kinds of music? Or Jody, maybe you could remember.
Synesthesia.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I forgot the name for it.
Yeah, he associated colors with tones, but he liked to learn pieces through copycat, where I would play a phrase, and then because of his perfect pitch, it was pretty easy for him to repeat that back. And even chords with quite a few notes in them, he could hear that pretty well. So I thought that made it a little easier to teach that he could do copycat so well.
Yeah, one of my students also had synesthesia that his mother discovered. He was minimally verbal, and that was how he learned his scales. She made up laminated strips that would have the letter names of the scale in the colors that he heard or saw, and that was how he learned and memorized all of his scales. So it can be a wonderful tool and a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I have a question now that you
Yes.
mentioned. I have a student, and this has nothing to do with autism, so I apologize. But, his mom is dyslexic, and he was really struggling to read, and it was sad because his little sister was just zooming ahead of him. And when she told me that, I did a little bit of research, and they mentioned how important color is. So I had him color every note in his book a different color, like C would be blue, or all the D's he would color green. And that, and even the right hand and the left hand, he would color different colors. And it seemed to help him. Do you have anything that you might want to add to that, or?
I am not an expert on dyslexia at all, but what I'm going to drop in the chat is one of my doctoral students who this is her research focus, and there's a reason for this research focus. And so she would probably love to chat with you or talk about it. It's Olivia Colamayo. I just dropped her email address in the chat. And she serves on the Committee for Special Needs for the National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy, and I'm sure that we are going to try and include some of that on the program there. I'm going to fight for it. And then she's also presented at the National MTNA, so you'll see her around.
Summer has a question.
Yes.
I guess so. I'm a pretty young teacher right now. I have my first student with autism, and I guess my question is, when using piano methods or when teaching them with methods, do you ever find that you have to drastically change or kind of abandon what the method's doing, or that just to make it work for them. I struggle with using a method and not, I guess, using it entirely as it's meant to be used, I guess.
Yeah,
But
sure. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We do what the student needs. And so I tend to gravitate towards a certain piano method, and that's simply because, I'm like you, I'm busy and I know that method very, very well. But we spread out the pacing a lot, and I find that there's often not enough literature at the level that my student is at, so we end up supplementing it and supplementing and supplementing. And then I also use improvisation as a teaching tool, sort of in the manner of music learning theory, so that my students are experiencing all of those concepts and hearing them and equating them with black and white keys and the hand and finger movements needed, so that by the time we get to the piano method, I just say, you know what you can do? That's what it looks like when we write it out. And then we do a lot of composition exercises too to supplement the method book, and that seems to work real well.
is there anything you use for improvisation and composition specifically?
Uh, for composition, my own brain and music staff paper that I print out and enlarge so that my students with fine motor skills can really navigate it with the pencil. And then I have an improvisation curriculum because we teach a topics course in that at the graduate level from the beginning to advanced. And so that's something that I use.
Would you mind sharing that improvisation curriculum? Or?
I hope to in the next couple of years. Right now, it's here. It
Oh,
needs to get out into another format. So yeah, unfortunately, it lives in my head right now.
yeah.
Hey Scott, amazing. I saw a lot of your new repertoire out of what's called new Federation disc, which is good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was really pleased that that happened, and I'm very happy to be working with Tom Giroux on that.
The two evocations, that those are
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, there are two books of evocations, which are it's basically a set of preludes that we call evocations. There are a few other books, one on how to play repeated notes, another on solos that are all based on intervals, and then we have a lot of solos out there. And we just released Henri Bertini,
Yeah.
Opus 137, Etude Elementaire. It's a whole book of what I feel is really good sight reading, transposition, and etude material, because he always takes an unusual turn or a very interesting harmonic progression, which is similar to what kids will have to do in the advanced repertoire before they get there. So that's all available on the Tom Giroux Music website and also on Amazon.
We don't have any more questions. This has just been wonderful, Scott. Thank you so much.
Thank
We've
you.
Thank you.
His book is available on Amazon, and I'm gonna buy it. I know Rachel already has it, and I don't know who else already has it, but I think it's a wonderful resource for those of us that are teaching people that we need to know more about.
Well, thank you very much for letting me be with you today. And for those of you who are working with some kids with autism, thank you so much. And if you're thinking about it, don't be afraid. You're not going to break these kids. All they want is a chance.
The parents will help you.
And they will, yeah. Parents are 100% our best resource.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for a wonderful presentation. Very illuminating, enlightening. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
You too.